Mr. Speaker, every year under General Secretary Xi Jinping and his Chinese Communist Party, between 60,000 to 100,000 young victims, average age 28, are murdered in cold blood to steal their organs. These crimes against humanity are unimaginably cruel. Ethnic groups targeted for this mass harvesting include Uyghurs, who suffer from Xi Jinping's ongoing genocide, and the Falun Gong, whose peaceful meditation and exercise practices and exceptional good health make their organs highly desirable. The Chinese Communist Party has declared them to be an evil cult fit for butchering. Mr. Speaker, in May of last year, I chaired an absolutely chilling congressional hearing at the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission entitled Forced Organ Harvesting in China, Examining the Evidence. The China Tribunal, chaired by Sir Jeffrey Nice, and this is the man who prosecuted Slobodan Milosevic at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, a tribunal that I worked very hard on and was very supportive of, as were other members of this body. He conducted the world's first independent legal analysis of forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience in China. Sir Jeffrey Nice testified at my hearing and said, quote, "Forced organ harvesting has been committed for years throughout China on a significant scale." And he said that the Falun Gong practitioners have been one and probably the main source of organ supply. He said the Falun Gong and the Uyghurs in the PRC each qualify as a group for purposes of the crime of genocide. Ethan Gutman, Senior Research Fellow in China Studies, Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, testified that the Kilgore-Mattis-Gutman report of 2016 estimated China's total transplant volume, this is forced transplantations, as 60 to 100,000 annually. Mr. Gutman also pointed out that, and I quote him, at any given time since 2017, there are approximately 1 million Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyzstan individuals, and others in the camps. These are the concentration camps, of course, made up mostly of Muslims. And he said that his estimate is that 25,000 to 50,000 camp detainees are being harvested every year. Again, he says 28-year-olds from Xinjiang camps can be harvested for 2 or 3 organs each, translating into a maximum of about 150,000 organs. Another expert witness who testified at our hearing, Matthew Robertson of the Australian National University, co-authored with Dr. Jacob Laviv an examination of Chinese medical journal articles and found that, quote, 71 papers gave explicit descriptions of surgeons appearing to violate the dead donor rule while procuring hearts from prisoners. In plain language, the papers appear to show that the donors who were prisoners were alive at the time of surgery and were killed by transplant surgeons in the process of heart extraction, close quote. Their work, published last April in a top peer-reviewed U.S. medical journal, the American Journal of Transplantation, provided additional evidence of the People's Republic of China's egregious practices in violation of international standards, and these are, again, crimes against humanity. Robert Destro, the former Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, testified the size and the scope of the organ harvesting and trafficking market is, his words, staggering. Mr. Speaker, we also know through open source Chinese language media that elderly, high-ranking Chinese Communist Party officials have received replacement organs from the very people they despise, like the Falun Gong, like the Uyghurs, and oppose. And there's one particular hospital, Army Hospital 301 in Beijing, that excels at this. While this still shocks me, and I know it shocks my colleagues, I cannot say it surprises me. Almost 25 years ago, I chaired a hearing, and Doug Anderson, who was sitting right here, was a part of that as part of the top staff of the committee, I chaired a human rights hearing with a Chinese security officer who testified that he and other security agents were executing patients with the doctors right there and ambulances ready to harvest their organs after the bullets were fired. Indeed, at last year's hearing, we produced a doctor who testified that he had performed one such surgery on a victim. He was forced to, he claimed, a botched execution, who began cutting. As he began cutting, discovered that the victim was in a state of shock. He wasn't dead yet. A live vivisection on a living human being. He has nightmares to this day. To combat these heinous and inhumane practices, the Stop Organ Harvesting Act of 2023, a bipartisan piece of legislation, amends the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 to require reports on forced organ harvesting and trafficking in persons for purpose of the removal of organs in foreign countries, including and especially in China. The imposition of serious sanctions on any person the President determines funds, sponsors, or otherwise facilitates forced organ harvesting or trafficking for purpose of removal of organs. And what does that mean? Civil penalties up to $250,000, and criminal penalties include a fine of up to $1 million and imprisonment for not more than 20 years or both. So we're serious about sanctioning this egregious practice. Sanctions also include blocking and prohibiting all transactions in property and interest in property, and making such persons inadmissible to the United States and ineligible to receive a visa. State-sponsored forced organ harvesting is big business for Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party, and shows absolutely no sign of abating, which is why we and the rest of the world needs to step up, particularly the democracies of this world. We must act. I say to my colleagues, we must act decisively. I would like to thank Chairman McCall for his co-sponsorship and his tremendous leadership on this bill, as well as Ranking Member Meeks for both of their strong support, and our Democratic co-sponsor, Bill Keating, as well as Kathy Manning, for their strong support for this and co-sponsorship of this legislation. And a very special thanks to Mary Vigil, Janice Kagayutan, who is sitting over here on my right, on the Democrat side, Pierre Otazi, who's the General Counsel for the China Commission, of which I am chairman, and Doug Anderson, who's done a wonderful job throughout all of this, and Mary McDermott Noonan, my Chief of Staff, all of who worked so diligently in such a cooperative and bipartisan way to bring this piece of legislation to the floor. I reserve the balance of our time.